Yo, yo, yo. Back with another episode of the Black Superheroes MatterPodcast. I'm your host, Stephen Christian. And in this episode, we'll be talking with Frederick Jones, who's a serial entrepreneur. He had some roots in the video game industry back in the 90s and early 2000s before moving on to doing a lot more stuff in the intersections of Black creativity and Black entrepreneurship. And so he has Saturday AM, he has Saturday PM, focused on propelling creators of color in manga and anime. And we just had a great conversation just about the industry, the video game industry, just living with COVID, navigating that, the pitfalls, and just what's it like to be a Black creator, both in business and in the arts. And so hopefully you enjoy it. And without further ado, let's get it started. I wanted to take a break from the episode to let you know that we have some merch that is available. Over at Iltopia Studios, you can find the Black Superheroes Matter art book, which is a collection of illustrations that reimagine your favorite superheroes through the eyes of children of color. We also have a bunch of sticker packs, over 120 different sticker designs of your favorite superheroes. More importantly, we have our Color Me Super coloring book series. Definitely check out the merch at shop.iltopia.com or blacksuperheroesmatter.com. And now back to the episode.
Welcome to another episode of the Black Superheroes Matter podcast. Today we have Frederick Jones. He's, what we say, like an entrepreneur, like, a creator, part of Saturday AM. And I know you have like your hands in a bunch of different things, right? And so how's everything going with you right now?
Things are going well. Things are going well. You're gonna hear my dog a little bit just because I'm in my little study, working from home now with COVID still. You learn to kind of deal with these aspects, but now I've got that aspect going on. But going well. Again, my name is Frederick. I'm the founder and publisher of Saturday AM, the world's most diverse manga brand. We started the company back in 2013 after a long career in the video game industry, I write some of our comics. I lead the company. I manage a couple of different departments within the company, and just try to ultimately keep us, moving in the right direction. Though.
Nice. And so, like how'd you all get started? Because I know that like you're sort of at this space now, but like what was sort of that like launching point for you?
Well, again, like obviously, I don't know if folks will see the camera, but obviously you can see that I've got gray hair, so I'm not a young man. So I had a long career, actually in the video game industry, and so I'd had the privilege to actually work on a number of big properties, handling product marketing and intellectual property management. I was in charge of for Blockbuster Corporate at one point in my career. I was in charge of the retail section of Blockbuster for certain video game products like the hardware, accessories, and some of the additional products with their video games, things like that. So, I had been a longtime fan of anime and manga, again, I was into it, a long time ago. Back when we didn't have the streaming services, we didn't have Toonami. In fact, it was really hard to be into anime and manga when I was into it when I was a kid. So long story short, I just had always had that passion for it in the video game industry, even when I was in it. If you were into anime manga, that was kind of a through line for it at that point, because you could kind of get your fix, through the video game industry companies like Capcom and Square Enix and Konami and stuff. They a lot of their video games had the Japanese aesthetic. And so when I left the gaming industry in the mid 2000s, I had loved to do next. and I was getting really excited at the growth of iPhone. I had been a big proponent of Apple devices for my time in the video game industry, particularly when the iPod launched and the iPod Nano and the iPod Color, and you had like video, and you could. I remember I bought the very first unit when it came out. Some of your listeners, even yourself, may not remember all this, but there was the iPod Video, which you could actually hook up. So you had to hook it up to your computer, and they had like a really rudimentary store. You could download stuff. I remember downloading the Bomberman game, Bomberman from Hudson Soft, and I remember just thinking to myself, like it blew my mind at the convenience, even though it was nowhere near convenient the way it is today. But it just blew my mind, that process. Like I downloaded the Incredibles movie and that, and from that moment on, I had this bug, and I kept pushing during that time in the video game industry to try to get more digital downloads, more digital content into companies. And it just, things weren't at that level in the early 2000s yet. In fact, I had actually started that process with Dreamcast. We did a downloadable piece for some games that I worked on at the time for I forget what they call it, but it was like a memory card that had like a little screen on it. And so we actually had
it was like a little like nano. Yeah, I remember.
Yeah,
it was like a little like
like a little memory card on the screen. You plug it into the controller, and you could actually use it separately as a game. The graphics were horrible. It was like little dot matrix graphics, but still, I was part of the team that worked on that very, back in that era, and we had downloadable content for my day called 4x Evo and Railroad Tycoon. I had online players. So I had long been into this, is my point. It's a couple of years later when I was really pushing, I was really evangelizing that inside of Blockbuster Corporate, where I was an executive, and I could tell, the companies weren't really ready for it. No one was trying to get in on that. And so that always stayed with me. And so when I left the gaming industry, was looking for my next challenge, all of those things, being a longtime anime fan and seeing how anime is starting to blow up, looking at globalization and looking at how a lot of people countries that I never would have thought would have been into anime were now into anime, like African countries and Latin American countries. Well, Latin American countries had been before, but African countries, European countries, like I was really blown away at how big anime had exploded in that time frame. And I decided, this is a great opportunity then to create a company devoted to diverse manga style content, knowing that we can hit an international audience immediately. We don't have to go through different international territories just to get our work out there with the internet. And at the time, very early on, social media, I felt you could really do a lot of things in the business world. A lot of companies are still dragging their feet on. So all of those kind of conspired to launching Saturday AM. There's obviously more to it than that, and we may get to that. But that's how the idea came about, was just wanting to bring some diversity to manga because I saw how it was growing, and then wanting to really play in this digital space because I saw that there was tremendous opportunity with that, and I didn't feel like people were really recognizing it at the time. So, so that's the kind of the early story.
Oh yeah, definitely, and it always always takes me back because like obviously the iPod video, the
Mm-hmm.
the first, that was around the time that like the Boondocks came out, and so I remember like downloading the whole the whole first and second season of the Boondocks onto my iPod video so that I could watch it on that little tiny screen,
Yes,
and
yes, very tiny screen.
Like those are sort of the early days of all the stuff that we see now, where you had to have a dock, you had to have this, you had to have that, you had to have all these different accessories. And now you just everything is wireless, everything is mobile and high fidelity, and it's crazy to see how like things have changed just over the past 10 years, 10, 12, 15 years.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, without question. Yeah.
Because I think when I first got into making comics and trying to get into animation and stuff like that, this was back when like there weren't even like any videos on YouTube to like learn about this stuff. I think
Oh,
I think when I think when I started trying to learn how to like do comics and stuff like that, and you look up stuff on YouTube, I think that like the only one was like really like white manga. Like he was really one of the only people that was like doing something consistently. And you know, obviously like we see how that sort of turned out, because he's part of Saturday AM. He's like doing all the stuff with Apple Black, and he has this big following. And but like it was really like him, you know, in terms of like diverse creators on YouTube, you know. And it's and so for that I saw that, like, you know, obviously for you, like video games, like the video game industry, you know, is still sort of having that conversation around you know, around like diversity, because, you know, we're starting to see more Black animators, but we're not seeing a lot of Black game developers, you know. And
correct, yeah.
For you, like how was that sort of like navigating that space in the video game industry back in what I would imagine, what, like, you know, 90s and early 2000s?
That's exactly, I remember going to my first E3, I think it was 99, 98 or 99, maybe 98. And I remember going to it. I was an executive at the time with a company called Rap Collins. It was a ad agency. We had the PlayStation account. And so we went there. And I remember going in early, because we obviously were connected to Sony. So we were going in early. And when you go into any convention, when you go into it, you know, it's at a convention center, typically in a big city, and you see them setting it up, right? Because they have unions, and the unions ultimately are the only ones allowed to put stuff up in a convention center, and they do an excellent job. I'm, you know, pro union all the way, so they go in and they do all the stuff. But I remember seeing it, and I remember thinking to myself, the only people I see of color here are the people working in the union putting up these booths. So I was the only Black person at that time that I remember seeing who was walking around, you know, in a suit, and, you know, as an executive. And then, you know, just to put it in additional context, the only women I remember seeing in that time frame, now keep in mind this is almost 20 years ago, but the only women I remember seeing in that time frame were scantily clad models who were there just to, you know, kind of shake their butt and, you know, wear, you know, really busty low cut shirts so that they can hawk some video game, right? And the sad part is that the majority of these video games were forgettable. No one would ever remember these video games. But that's what they were there. You know, you did not see women walking around as executives. You know, if you did, and I'm pretty sure there was like maybe one or two, like myself, they were in marketing. Like they weren't a developer, they weren't an executive, they were like some marketing person. So yeah, I mean, look, you know, all the industries are having a kind of a reckoning when it comes to race. You know, I talked about this over the past year in interviews that I've done, but I've talked about how, you know, when I started the company, you know, I mean, there were a lot of people who, you know, attacked me, you know, aggressively, and in some cases, obviously passive aggressively, over the idea that, like, you know, who do I think I was? You know, like, anime is perfect the way it is. You didn't need to have diversity. It's already diverse, you know, blah, 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 blah. And that's typical. If you're a conscious Black person or person of color working in any industry, and you are looking to try to advance it, then you're going to receive those type of, you know, pushback. And I felt the same thing in the video game industry as well. So, but I remember over the last summer, I was in interviews. I said, you know, what do you make of this whole George Floyd thing and the Black Lives Matter? I said, all it is just a realization for a lot of white people, to be frank, who are seeing what many of us have been saying for years. And what they're seeing is a frustration play out from people who are tired. They're just tired of bringing it up and then having the gaslit element of the right-wing conservative, you know, parties and so forth in this country try to portray it as, you know, as if, like, you know, look, I really care, but they don't do anything about it, and they don't really care, right? It's just paying lip service. And nothing changes. And so you're saying that's what you saw, was that kind of exhaling of just pure frustration from a lot of particularly young Black people who really, frankly, have not even had the sort of struggles that my generation and others have had. But they're waking up to a world where they may not have it was a beautiful day today here where I live at. They may not have days like that in the future. And I think a lot of young people are acutely aware of that because, they're very aware of climate change. They're aware of the deregulation of things and how that impacts food and things they could try to do in terms of living a good, clean life. They're acutely aware, again, of racism and the damages and the danger that racism causes. So while they've not fought for civil rights in the way that maybe my generation did, and certainly the generation before me did, they're seeing these things and they're acting out as a result of it, rightfully so. And it's causing a conversation to happen amongst particularly white people, because a lot of white people are the people I'm talking about who are conscious of this now and are saying, wait a minute, this, if this guy can get, have his life snuffed out in front of people by a cop who's got his hand in his pocket, kneeling on this man, people are telling him not to do it. If that can happen, then everything, then white supremacy is real. And everything I've ever assumed about my life as a white person, when I thought, well, yeah, some people are racist, but that doesn't really affect me because I'm not, and people I know aren't, they had a chance to have that reckoning to say, wait a minute, no, this actually is really a thing. This is real. This actually happens. This is not something I can turn a blind eye to, because if they're this obvious in doing it, the cop's got his hands in his pocket and he's on camera and doesn't seem to care, then what happens in the future when they come for me? And I think, so you're seeing a lot more of that now. So I think the video game industry, the entertainment industry proper, movies, TV, we obviously see, what's happening right now with our Asian brothers and sisters all over the country, all over the world. So I think we're in a good moment for reflection. I think we're in a tenuous moment for in terms of saying, I want to be treated fairly. I'm not going to take no for an answer. And so the powers that be have got to ask themselves, we can't placate these people. So what are we prepared to give up? Because either we know what we're doing is wrong, or we know that this is not sustainable, that there's going to be more violence, more upheaval if we don't do something about it. So I think all these industries are having a come to Jesus moment, and where it goes, I don't know, but I certainly hope for the best. And I know that, what we built with Saturday AM, as I said about the interviews I gave last summer, when they asked me about it, I'm like, I would tell them, we talked about this 8 years ago. I talked about this 8 years ago and got, had people talk about me behind my back or attacking me and accusing me of trying to create controversy. Now, all of a sudden, everyone, we were there before Marvel had all these young Black and brown superheroes. We were there before Miss Marvel, Miles Morales, Ironheart, Riri Williams. We were there before all these characters. We were there before the Black Panther film came out. We were championing this and growing our fan base globally, despite being told by everybody, "Oh, this is not necessary. You guys are making more of an issue about this. Diversity not needed. There's already diversity." And so, for me, like I said, for me, I was like, "I told you so." When you see George Floyd, I'm like, "I told you so. I told you this was out there, and that this is what was needed. Representation is what these kids want, and they're not going to take no for an answer." So the industry still got a long way to go. To answer your question, your initial question, the industry's got a long way to go. I don't know, I don't know if the video game industry has addressed it, and I don't know what they're doing to address it. We certainly have some partners in this space. The TV companies make a lot of overtures for this, but who knows? I still think there's, just like football and basketball, still aren't a lot of Black coaches in major teams. Still aren't a lot of Black owners of major sports franchises. Certainly all that is true of movies and TV. So, I think it's going better. Certainly the awareness is better. How much has actually changed, we'll see.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think and it's, you know, it's interesting, right? Because over the past 10 years, right, like
Mm.
we sort of seen these, we sort of seen the, like, what we thought was going to be like the rise of like more Black inspired, like just more representation in animation and,
Mm-hmm.
you know, television shows towards the end of, like, you know, you know, the early 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there it sort of just like really just fell off, you know, after like
Yeah.
2010 it really fell off, you know, because we had like Black Dynamite, we
Yeah.
had, you know, freaking Black Panther, like we were coming off the tail end of like Afro Samurai, um you know, and then there was just a dry spell, and by the time like that happened, I, you know, finished playing football and I like retired, and then I was just like, dang, you know, like when I turn on the TV, there ain't even any Saturday morning cartoons anymore. Like there ain't nothing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so then
Yeah.
like so then I just, you know, sat there and was like, okay, well, this whole Oscars so white thing is going on. Um
Yeah.
there's a lot of like just representation is just not there. And so
Mm-hmm.
I, you know, the start of this whole like Black Superheroes Matter project, or what originally was Black Heroes Matter, and then
Mm-hmm.
I made the mistake of not buying the domain name right when I like put it up,
Yeah.
and so I ended up like publishing under that identity, but I didn't get the domain name
Sure.
and the subject handle. And so then I was just like, well, dang, you know, but like putting out that project, uh it was really just sort of just saying like, okay, in order to like mitigate sort of the problems that we're seeing, you just got to do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah.
you just got
Yeah.
to,
That's right.
even if you have just a pen and a piece of paper, and you just do some scribbles, right? Like
That's
you
right.
just sort of put that idea out there, put it out there, and then, you know, make it available for people to engage with it, and
That's right.
and that, you know, I think many of the things that like we're sort of seeing, and, you know, you could speak to that with like what you said with your journey, but it's like, you know, you see a void there, you decide to you have a reason for, you know, taking on that problem,
Mm-hmm.
and then you know, sort of just have it available for public scrutiny in
Right.
many ways, where it's where, you know, people will have their opinions about it,
Mm-hmm.
but time will tell whether they were right or wrong, you know, and
Definitely. That's right. Yeah.
you
Mm-hmm.
know, and like the beauty of like last year, I mean, for all of the, you know, all of the pitfalls and problems that like, you know, 2020 had, the
Mm-hmm.
beauty of last year was that at least for me, like as a Black creator that tries to tell like unapologetic Black stories,
Yeah.
um I remember that in January and February, before like convention season was supposed to start, um,
Mm-hmm.
I was working on books. Like I was working on like this series of like AR books on like a, I got like deep into like the augmented reality space, and so I was working on
Sure. Yeah.
those, but I was trying to figure out like with the stuff that I'm trying to like tell,
Mm-hmm.
maybe I have to tone it down so that it's more palatable, you know. And then towards the end of the year, I was like, the stuff that I was worried about like content wise that like would go over people's
Mm-hmm.
heads or I would have to explain,
Mm-hmm.
like from the year, like those things don't need to be explained because people
No.
understand it now, you
Yes.
know.
That's right.
It's not a culturally specific, they're the references aren't as culturally specific uh, as they, you know, quote unquote were pre pandemic,
That's
and
right.
and so you know, that I think that was really enlightening, um, because it makes all the work that you did all the way up until this point, you know, all worth it, because you know it you know, the market sort of catches up, or society catches up to what those ideas that you sort of
Yeah.
set out to pursue, you know.
Yeah. I mean, well, look, I mean, again, you know, so there's a couple of things there that you mentioned. I think the first thing is that, you know, when I started the company, when I started CRDM, the whole ethos of what we're doing, the whole ethos of what we're trying to do at least, is to create a brand and therefore create, a momentum that opens up the space and says, and creates a pathway that says, hey, diversity matters, diverse manga style characters, can be relevant. And we're going to crash through the malaise and crash through the naysayers. Sorry, dog is doing anything. But we're going to crash through all of that and create a space and showcase how it's done so that other groups will come in and fall behind us. This is the old, corporate idea of, if I get a foot in the door, I'm going to keep the door open long enough for a few others to come in. Then as we go through the company, we can create that we can create more door openings for more people of color to eventually come in, and women and so on and so forth to come in and start to create the change and the representation that's needed. So Saturday M has always been an exercise in that from the get-go. And so we see when I talk to young creators like yourself and a host of other young people, like I'm always excited about that, because that's the idea, like, we have to show it can be done for it to matter and for it to inspire other creators, and who knows where it goes after that. The other part of it in terms of people catching up to it. So to that end about young creators and about, us doing it. So this isn't new. Let's just start off with that. This isn't new, right? Again, I'm 47 years old. I'm assuming I'm older than you. And this isn't new. When I was in college in Carolina in the 90s, there was an Afrocentric movement that was happening culturally. You had Tribe Called Quest, you had De La Soul, you had the Fugees, you had this sort of, but you had this push towards Afrocentrism, which was a little different than what was happening a decade before with like Eddie Murphy and that sort of era of like, individual Black people who kind of broke through the mainstream. You actually had people who were consciously Black and were consciously making content that featured us. And we're celebrating that fact. And so there was a comic book movement at the time. I'm sure you've heard of like Milestone Comics and so forth. That came out during that era. There was a comic called Brother Man that came out during that era. So there were a lot of Black creators that came to fruition in that moment. And so the idea that, again, Black content, Black comics could exist, that was all that's happened before. We've had it in the 70s, we've had it in the 40s even. But it's happened many times over the years. That said, I think that what I was passionate about doing, and why I think that we, to your point, we've kind of hit this point where things are catching up to stuff that we started 8 years ago. We're going to have our 10-year anniversary in another couple of years. Is, again, as I said earlier, I was looking at so many different things happening and trying to put them all together, and recognizing that all these things, therefore, if you were a conscious Black man and you cared about these things, then you looked at all the different threads of opportunity that were happening. So, for example, like when you talk about Afro Samurai, like personally, that's not something that ever appealed to me. I think it's a joke. That doesn't in any way capture Blackness to me. I just think it's kind of a silly thing. I know a lot of young people are into that because that was the first thing they saw. But like for me, like that was never a thing that caught me. So just like in the 90s, you had comics that popped up and was like Black this character, or Black that character, or brother this character. Like those never appealed to me. Those never caught me, because my thing was always, what's more impactful is to have something that can easily plug in to the existing mainstream standard, which of course is centered around whiteness, but at the same time is unapologetically Black. And therefore that means then that like it in other words, it should appeal to non-Black people, but yet be clearly Black, so that it can make itself very clear that like, no, we're going to show you that the same way you're into this kid with a Japanese name who looks as white as they can be called Naruto Uzumaki, you could be into a kid who is Black, has a Black name, and is still being a ninja or still doing fun, cool things. You can be into that, and we can show you how that works. even like you and here in the video, you wanted to have the logo up there. Even the logo, like there were things like where I was just really passionate about, like, you know, again, coming from a corporate background, coming from the video industry, I wanted us to have a look and a feel that was, again, completely synonymous with what you would see in any other corporate environment. So the logo, the way we did our design, the fact that we had articles, the fact that we had a magazine where the stories appeared, the fact that it was an anthology format, which is typical to the Japanese manga experience. All those things were really, really, really important to us. And so now that people are catching up to that, I always make sure that they understand that what we tried to do was kick the door down by saying we can compete with the best Japanese companies out there, the best American companies out there. We can compete with you guys. Not perfectly, and we certainly have had to grow, you know, over the years and get better and better at things. But the idea was always to compete with those companies. It was never to be just the black face of things. It was to compete and say, we can create a company that can go toe to toe with you guys. And guess what? We happen to have a black person at the helm of it. We happen to have a group of people in the editorial and design who are women, who are gay, who are LGBTQ, who are you know, Arabic, and so on and so forth. Like, we can have a diverse group from top to bottom, still producing content that's every bit as quality as what these big companies would do, which typically are all white companies who are, if they choose to show, again, a black character, it's through like a lens. And when black folks have done these things, again, it tends to be something kind of feels kind of like a student film type of thing, and not the sort of like grade, you know, like, you know, sheer like attention to detail across the spectrum. So, you know, we tried to do something different. We tried to look at everything that was happening and read the tea leaves about diversity, about digital distribution, about globalization. We were discovering creators before anybody else. They had the magazine format. I have this thing I talk about internally about, with a 2013 mentality. And when I look at a lot of the folks who try to compete with us, or I look at a lot of the folks that are out there, they have a 2013 mentality, which is that they feel as if creating content, you know, as an individual, is neat. And for me, it's not neat. You trust me. There's nothing neat about this idea of it. It's work. It's painful at times. It's really, really suffocating at times. But there's nothing neat about it, right? Like, we don't get excited because some of our folks, of course, do. But like, I've never pushed us to get excited because we did something, because we did a cover, because we did a really good issue, because we did, our toys, right? Like, none of these things, like, I've never pushed our folks to get excited by that. I've pushed them to continue to rise to the occasion and rise to the level of the people that they admire. If you love Kishimoto, well, how do we demonstrate that we can be as good as Kishimoto? How can we make the chapters just as engaging and thrilling? How do we excite the fan base issue to issue? How do we have, you know, that additional artwork for marketing and promotional purposes that can really showcase just a consistency of the character? You know, all those various things. So, you know, it's nice to see things are catching up to what we started doing. But again, one of the areas that, for example, that we cared about, that I know for a fact other people aren't experiencing, is making money. Like, you know, like, I could care less about people being excited that they made a black character. I could care less about that. I think it's great, it's neat, but like, that's not going, at the end of the day, if you create a black character, but you made no money and you have no real traction and nobody knows what you're doing, you know, it's the old thing about, you cut a tree down in the middle of the forest, nobody hears it. Did it happen, you know? So for us, that's, you know, we've always looked to try to have a greater sense of ambition, because we feel a greater sense of responsibility for what comes after. So.
Oh yeah, definitely. And you know, for me, I definitely see that in the immersive tech space right now, where, you know, it's either, you know, lack of diversity and lack of all those different things, or we have or they're trying to figure out how to make money off of it, where it's all super experimental and it looks cool, but ain't nobody going to use it, ain't nobody going to pay for it. You know, you just got a video that, you know, people just saw on TikTok or saw on Twitter for, you know, 10 to 60 seconds. And so we're starting to see that in the space as well. But then there's this sort of there's this area of empowerment to where no, there aren't practical use cases, but there's skills that are involved in bringing those things to life that that can create opportunities and possibly make something later down the line that is profitable. And I think being open to exploring those things and being open to engaging in stuff in that way is one of the things that I've just like noticed has been just more accessible now. Like instead of people going back to a 4-year university during a recession, they just get themselves a Skillshare account and they start a YouTube channel, right? Like it's those are
no question, it's no question about it. You're 100% right.
Like it's
well, now we'll see if those things actually we'll see because I'm always dubious of the YouTube thing. I'm always dubious of that. When I first met White, if he had 3,000 people, I don't think he even had 3,000 people on his YouTube. I didn't think YouTube was. I remember YouTube was where people were ripping off before Crunchyroll came out. They're ripping off Naruto and other animated shows that weren't officially over here yet. And but I remember he was doing that, and he took it somewhat seriously, and then he didn't take it so seriously, and then he took it seriously in the last couple of years, and that's when he had the most explosive growth. But yeah, I mean, it's it's one of those things you're just like so I don't know. I mean, technology, like you said, the question is, I'm always an advocate for our communities getting a chance to engage in that tech space, because that's my great fear that we'll miss out on some of these revolutions. So
yeah, and that's because I literally just had so like with me, one of the things that I saw is that like, okay, with AR is supposed to be worth a $200 billion industry in the next 5 years, right? Headsets, all these different things, right? And so me growing up in the Bay Area, during the whole Silicon Valley boom, and then seeing all of those,
we had a few booms in Silicon Valley,
right? And then like the early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s, and then seeing like all my family sort of being pushed out of like Oakland and out of Richmond and all those places. And then also 5-10 years later, reading all these op-eds of like, where's all the Black people in tech in Silicon Valley? It's like, well, we was here and y'all was pushing us out. And so seeing this next sort of wave of technology and innovation, and then also seeing just the lack of diversity or the lack of inclusion.
Absolutely.
That's really like focused the work that I've like been doing in the space, where yes, like all the stuff I'm doing is super experimental, but like it's exploring stuff that appeals to Black people, right? Like it's just being unapologetically Black in the space, and that's something that like you just won't see unless there's inclusion of Black people. And then from there, just posting it.
Totally agree.
And then
I totally agree.
And then interestingly enough, just like seeing how that would just catch traction, and then before you know it, you're having conversations with X, Y, and Z, and then those conversations lead to this, and then you continue work, and then then you just have this sort of you're on this pathway, right? And like you're on this pathway that's focused on these things, and it sort of and ultimately it just like leaves an impact, and that impact people just like find inspirations from. I just found it just really interesting how like how just things just sort of happen, right? Where it just starts from an idea. Like
it definitely does. I mean, now it does. I think what I will say is that the challenge, of course, for more diverse communities in the tech space. And we certainly have dealt with this. I mean, we have a tech element because, we were digital. We're digital first in terms of our comments and so forth. I mean, let's not kid ourselves, right? I mean, the issue is that there's not a lot of funding for people of color. So, I've told the story before about how when I was living in Dallas, Texas, there was a Black Planet was a big website. Still is, still a website that a lot of people probably my age still use if they're single. But you had Black Planet, you had what was it called? I think it was Dallas something, and but it was a site from a young black guy, young black man. Had started the site, and I remember I was using it at the time. I think we were probably about the same age. I was an executive, and he was a kid, I think, in college, but he had created the site that a lot of my people were using. It was mainly for finding out where the parties were. And saying, you create a profile, and then of course you could meet people and so forth. And so I remember that was huge. That site, that Dallas, whatever site it was huge in the early days, early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s. My point to that story, of course, is that, so there's nothing unique about Facebook, right? I mean, again, the Dallas site, Black Planet, MySpace, right? Facebook, this was all of those things, right? But yet Zuckerberg got billions of dollars to be pumped into his product. They lost money for almost a decade, 7 to 8 years. They lost money with venture capital. So fully funded venture capital. He got to retain more than 50% ownership as a young guy, and they were allowed to just continue to grow. And it wasn't like the site started even as a site that was meant to be. Again, like the Dallas site at least was about people who were in Dallas. It didn't matter who you were, like you hit a certain age range, I guess. Black Planet, I guess, was similar. But Facebook initially was a site set up just for Ivy League schools. So, think about that. And those folks who might listen to this, think about that. I want you to think about that, what I just said. Facebook had nothing original about it. And if there was anything original to it, it was more of a technical thing, but there was nothing original in terms of conceptually. And yet these other groups, which were, started by people who were, take MySpace out of the equation, but certainly these other sites which were started by Black people, intelligent Black people, hardworking Black people, young Black people in some cases. They weren't given the resources that Zuckerberg was given. Evan Spiegel, who created Snapchat, which again, in both in the case of Facebook and in Snapchat, neither of the two people who are the heads of those companies and are very young with zero past experience to get to retain the positions that they had. Both of those young men, who are of course white, both of them don't even, there was controversy as to whether or not they even actually created the company. There were challenges to their creation of the company that they had to resolve legally. So, and look, and I'm not here to bash on them. I mean, I have my issues with Facebook and Zuckerberg in terms of, stuff that's happened with white nationalism and so on and so forth, and his and a lot of social media's inability to seemingly care about fixing it. But that being said, hey, the hustle is the hustle. And if you were able to con somebody giving you money, great, good luck. That's fantastic. But let's be real. There are a lot of Black folks out there, and women and other men who are just as, if not smarter than some of these people we just mentioned, who have more accomplishments than these people who start these companies, who aren't going to get that level of investment. So again, I just want to temper, just like I talked about with Saturday AM and the creation of Saturday AM, and the fact that while we're always I'm always particularly happy to see other young creators of color following in that space. I think the part that we've done that I think is really important, I still see very little of that. I see too little of the idea of having a completely committed professional artifice that is meant to say we can compete at the highest level and do the things necessary to do that. Even if you struggle, at least have that identity, because that's what's going to change the system. It's not the first time we've seen Black characters in comics, and it won't be the last, obviously. So this has happened before generationally. So there's nothing new about it. So I see young folks who are like, yeah, I just thought, man, I wanted to see another Black character, so I created one. It's that's great, but that's not novel as they think. That's been done many times before. The question you have to ask is, why did those characters not break through? That's what you got to ask yourself. What was missing? What was required for that character to actually have an impact from a pop culture standpoint and from a business standpoint? What was missing? And that's what we've tried to answer. In the case of tech, which we play in the space of tech as well a little bit. That's always my number one issue. Again, I love seeing young Black and brown and female creators do TikTok and do YouTube and do the various things, but the question still comes down to what ultimately, like what control do you have? What who is actually invested in you? Who's giving you opportunities to create more of a future for yourself beyond creating it for these folks who are just getting richer off of what you do? I'll say this. Chris Rock has a great about this. It's not about this, but I think it's a perfect joke that illuminates what I'm talking about, especially for young people. He talks about how, he always loves how Black folk think that they're wealthy. He said they're not wealthy. And he gives an example of Shaq. Shaq's a very rich man. He said, but the guy who signs Shaq's checks is wealthy. And that's the fundamental difference, right? And so that's always my thing about, young Black creators, young Black folks in tech and so forth, is that we got to get to a place to where we actually have a competitive scenario. Not that we're existing and not that we're visible even, because those things matter, but they're not the ball game. The ball game is that we actually are in a position to actually be able to compete with the companies who are actually in charge of the platform. That's where things start to change, and you start to see more diversity from top to bottom. That's why Saturday AM is an entire operation and not just an individual series or two. So,
that's that provides some very, very valuable insights for people, right? Because instantly we just think, because of Kickstarter and because of print on demand publishing, we've seen a wave of Black people self-publishing their own books, putting out their own stuff, but then it'll probably stop at that book, or it'll probably stop at this or stop at that.
I was talking about this the other day. I can't tell you how many Black creators I've seen who got some press, got a Kickstarter funded. I've never seen that book in bookstores. Never seen that book in bookstores. Never heard about that creator after that fact.
Or
I
even
may remember
libraries,
because I backed the Kickstarter. Or library, exactly. So again, it's like where the power structure, where is it? How do we crack into that? Because that's really what makes the difference. Chris Rock again has a great joke. He talks about, he says, how white people feel powerless because they can't say the N-word. And he says, you know what? I'll tell you what, I'll let you say the N-word as a Black person. You let me control interest rates, right? Again, it's the question of power, like what real power is. And again, I'm not convinced the visibility by itself is power. Instead, it's just really being in a position to actually affect the operations and the businesses that have the most reach, have the most connection to the culture and to the communities. And when we start getting in those positions of power, we start creating companies that can do that. I think that's where you start getting a more interesting and transformative dynamic in terms of race relations and gender issues or biases and so forth. But yeah, I mean, the funding isn't there for a lot of tech stuff, and that's why, that's what needs to change. I'm not worried about, in other words, I'm not worried about seeing a Black guy or girl at Google. I could care less about that. Good for them. It means nothing. They're not Sergey Brin. They're not Larry Page. They're not going to be in charge of the company. They're not going to be detailing what the company does for artificial intelligence or for AI. In particular, AI is being used to be able to galvanize and track our faces and all sorts of surveillance platforms like Palantir and things like that. Black people aren't in charge of those companies. Like talk to me when I see a Black person get the funding to create a company that can address that type of thing, and I'll feel like we're now moving to a space where we actually see real changes. I can't hear you actually.
It's possible. It's all that stuff.
Oh yeah, it's definitely possible.
It's definitely possible. And so it's just a matter of, who's going to pull the trigger to, for those opportunities. And so, really, really appreciate the time, definitely dropping some knowledge, some wonderful insights. not only just sort of how to approach creativity and expand on it, but then, you know, what it feels like to be able to sustain it. Because you said you're going on your the 10-year anniversary, right?
We'll have our 10-year anniversary shortly. We've got some big announcements coming. People, you know, we just launched our app, our mobile app, last year, in our 7th year. People, you know, have been asking for that since day one. Just launched that. We're about to launch our 2nd app, but obviously, you know, I've always tried to run the company where we try to do the things the right way as opposed to rushing to do them. So we got some announcements that people have been wanting us to make. We're in the midst of finalizing those discussions, but you know, you can expect to see, you know, Clock Striker and Apple Black and those things, and you know, anime and movies and things like that in the near future. So we have a big 10-year anniversary plan right now. You know, we are you know, we just passed our 8th year, and we're just you know, we got big things happening. We're in the middle of March Art Madness right now. It's a big global art tournament. So we're really excited about that. As I said or showed earlier, we've got toys based on some of our biggest series. So I can't know if you can tell these, but yeah, so we got some toys, which are doing well at Hot Topic. We got a physical magazine coming out. We got some more announcements that are coming, but we got so much stuff that we're doing that right now we're just trying to, you know, maintain, man, just maintain. I will say too, one thing that I'm quite proud of is that we recently partnered with Sakura. They're a 100-year-old Japanese company. Yeah, they make micron pens and so forth, and that's our 3rd company from Japan. So, you know, to your point about things changing, I started the company, as I said at the very beginning of the chat, started the company, you know, people were skeptical. And, you know, it's nice to be here. It's nice to have grown, to thrive, to be, you know, the largest brand in the space. But I got to tell you, what really, the thing it does tell me that we are making some changes is that 3 of the top Japanese companies for manga production in Japan, as well as around the world, Sakura, Clip Studio Paint, Wacom, are partnering with us. No other group can say that. And so that tells you that that these companies not only recognize diversity that we've been talking about for a long time, but they also recognize our leadership in this space. And so again, you know, we're pretty proud of that, and keep pushing, you know.
Oh yeah, just got to keep pushing. Just super excited. I mean, you know, with everything, hopefully there's some AR coming down the pipeline soon. If not, you know,
we had a talk about it. Yeah, obviously, coming from the video game industry, I've got a lot of context there, so there has been some discussion on that level.
Yep. It's you know, it's that's a wonderful area, but then you know, like one of the things that really isn't talked about much that I'm really, you know, glad that you said is that, like, you know, the app store, just app development, you know, like that is, you know, the power of having an app available for people to download, that provides, for creators, that provides a whole new level of metrics, a whole new level of, you know, things that you know, that you can show, you know, it's a push notifications, all types of stuff. Like it
no, you're 100% right. You're 100% right. It does. You know, so we have the 2nd app we're coming out with is actually focused on that. So Saturday AM's app is all about Saturday AM, Saturday PM, Saturday Brunch, which are our 3 major magazines. But the new app called Pilot Manga by Saturday AM is actually more independent content that's not necessarily connected to us. There will be some exclusive content in it, and you'll also find some Saturday AM content in it, but it's really meant to, because the challenge is, to your point about that, the challenge with it, if you're an independent up-and-coming creator, and by the way, it's not gonna be set up like Webtoon. So, you know, so I see folks trying to rush to be the Webtoon, and we have no intent that we much in curated content. We believe that we've grown a brand. We've got, you know, very popular characters you see behind me. They're all creator owned. So we, you know, coming from my background, I'm, you know, I feel confident that I can recognize the next, you know, great property that we carry. But there are a lot of creators out there that are independent that we do like a lot, who don't necessarily maybe fit what we're doing, but we think are important. So, you know, the whole concept is think about Instagram. Instagram has 1 billion plus users. You can be the best artist in the world. It's going to be really hard to get noticed on Instagram. So, when you start Saturday, and we started Saturday, the entire idea, of course, of that, again, is to have this brand, like you said, above me, that really speaks. It just really, speaks to people, and they understand what it stands for, what it means. And therefore, everything associated with it, all different characters associated with it, they get that come up just by the sheer definition that they are tied to the brand. For us, I still continue to believe that it doesn't mean that Saturday is the only vehicle for that. Obviously, there are other groups out there trying to do the same thing or following our footsteps, and that's great. But we created the app, again, to this new app to cover that idea, because I do think it's really difficult to stand out. So, so like everyone can have an app. That's just the reality. Everybody can have an app. The funding it's going to be difficult, or stuff's going to be difficult, or more importantly, if anything, is, hey, you know what? A lot of folks, we're popular in 44 countries. If you got a phone and you're in one of those 44 countries, maybe not the most technologically advanced country, your computer is your phone, right? Like, you don't have a tablet and a phone and a desktop. You have the phone. So you think about what that means in some of those countries, and you think about the fact, therefore, then that they're not going to have a lot of space on that phone to upload all sorts of content. So you're individual and you got an app. How easy is that going to be to sell them on downloading your app? You can be the best artist in the world again, but it's like they only got limited space, right? They got space enough for Netflix and Spotify, and maybe a game or two, and some pictures and mail and various things like that. If they're going to download your app, they're going to expect there to be a lot of other stuff with that app, so they can feel confident. So the new app that we have will kind of help a lot of independent creators. We hope, not all, but ones that we think we can that we can support. We're going to have that set up to do that. So I think it is necessary, but I think it's also very difficult. I don't think it's as easy as just getting an app.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's just as a developer, just you'll work on something for probably a certain amount of time, then you spend 3 times as much time just debugging it and trying to make sure that mess works and trying to make sure the experience works and people understand it and all that. And so it does come with its set of realities and consequences for pursuing it. But let me
ask you. You're a tech guy, I think. Let me ask you 2 quick questions before I wrap up here. Let me ask you 2 quick questions, since you're a tech guy, because you seem to be a tech person, right? Or you're
yeah.
Okay.
I'm a developer.
Okay, so what do you make of NFTs?
So the thing that's going on right now is the environmental impact, because it costs, you're running freaking GPUs hot just to mint that thing. And so I think the thing that I do like about NFTs is that it has made it socially acceptable to sell project files.
That's right.
And so, because, as a creator, and like you're doing, you contract somebody to work on something, an animated file, something like that, right? Like you're sort of paying for their time to work on that project, and the deliverable isn't a physical copy of something. It's a file with those assets, that they create. And so, it's added value that goes beyond a specific market to those project files and that work. And so for that, I really appreciate it, because somebody that's just like, dang, I just want that, they could get the project, they get the project file, so on and so forth. They're able to do it. Before that, it's really just that client, that client contractor relationship that project file has value. And so for that, I appreciate it. It just, in order to mint something, it costs freaking $80, and then you got to pay all these gas fees, and then the impact on the environment. I think it's not much like a lot of the stuff in the crypto space right now. A lot of it isn't sustainable, because remember, like the conversation we were having back in the last, spike, was that there's no GPUs, there's no, GPUs that are impossible to find. And so now it's like, okay, like GPUs aren't, still have a shortage of GPUs, but it's really like people are making a lot of money, and it's having a detriment to the impact. Like it's impacting the environment a lot worse.
They're claiming they're making it neutral. They're claiming they're making it carbon neutral. I'll say this. Yeah. I'm torn by it. I will say I'm torn by it because as a liberal, as a progressive, as someone who cares about the environment, I am certainly not interested in doing things that are going to affect the environment. And like you said, it costs a great amount of power to mint one of these digital files. On the other hand, we started Saturday AM. One of the things that used to really push on White and a lot of our creators was the idea that part of what we had to do a lot of stuff, and we've done a lot of stuff over the years. But one of the things that mattered to me most was changing the culture of online readership. Our product, you had to buy it. You couldn't just go somewhere and get it for free. You had to buy it. And that's what instantly separated us from Webtoon and SmackGeeks and other groups. You had to buy it. You had to buy our stuff. And then we didn't charge a ton for it, so on and so forth. But, nor that we have a website where you loaded it full of ads. Like, we created an experience. It had a relatively inexpensive cost, but you still had to pay to access it. And people did it. Changing the culture mean get further into this, right? Like, there is something great about the idea of scarcity in the digital space, being able to create demand by saying, I'm only going to make 500 of these available, and know that only 500 of them are going to be actually available for people to actually own it. There's a power to that. There's a cultural necessity to that, and I think that really is important in the digital space. Likewise, this guy named Mike Diodato, who is an artist, used to work for Marvel. I think he's big now in the indie circuit. So he had a great thing about it. He's been selling a lot of his work, NFTs, and he's been getting a lot of pushback from fellow artists. He had a beautiful thing that I want to make sure your people hear, that you and your listeners hear. He talked about how in the comic book space, and everyone needs to hear this, there's very little money to be made in comic books. Let me be very clear with you. Again, this is one of those things where a lot of people have this fantasy in their mind about what comics are, and I constantly have to play the bad guy and tell them there's no money in this business. There's money if you break through. No, if you break through, again, if you break through and have like a mega hit, anything is possible. But you'd be better off thinking that you're gonna, get rich, marry Halle Berry, and have like a successful movie. Like the odds of these things happening, or playing in the NBA or playing in the NFL, like the odds of this happening are so extreme. Even if you have, something that gives you an opportunity to actually pursue it, it's still hard, right? As you know, being someone who played football, like, it's hard. It's not an easy thing to break into the higher leagues. It's astronomical, the odds. So comic books are already strapped, at least here in the West, certainly in the United States. And then, so Mike, he mentioned that. He didn't mention something else that I thought was interesting. He talked about how, and I think this is where I struggle, because I think he's 100% right. And therefore, then the question becomes, okay, so what's the issue here in terms of the environmental impact? He talked about how traditionally comic artists, to make ends meet, had to travel to a lot of shows. And I know this for a fact. They travel to a lot of shows throughout the year, and they have it budgeted, they have it so forth. They print a lot of flyers and not flyers, sorry, posters and prints and everything else. So the impact to the environment is massive. Majority travel around the country, if not the world, being in a position where they can physically sell items to you to supplement the income that the comic industry itself doesn't necessarily provide. So, so even if you're a great artist and you've got a decent fan following, then if you actually want to make that money to make sure you put your kid through college, or if you buy a house, whatever, you've actually got to supplement it through traveling to conventions, getting a booth, having stuff there to sell to people directly. And one of the things he mentioned that actually sells quite well, it's actually sold auction houses, is original comic art. So the actual pages that were developed, when Thanos first appears in a comic book, or when, Batman, has to save Robin or gets killed, whatever. Like those pencil sketches, that the original comic pages or inks go for hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so a lot of artists, were making income with that. Well, now that you've got conventions being stopped, right? Environment's being saved on that end, but now you're not traveling to the shows. You're not printing the prints. And if you are, then you have to try to, do other carbon intensive environments like, putting something together and then shipping it via UPS or FedEx or whatever to get to someone who may have bought it online. So you're attacking the environment that way. And so you start talking about, he's like, so why can't I sell it digitally? It's like, if I sell it NFT, then everything that I wanted to do before, now I've stopped traveling. I've stopped printing stuff physically. I've stopped having to, affect the environment. And this is, it's like one item. It goes out digitally, like you said. It's a one-time environmental impact for an item. It's not like every time that file gets sent, it gets pushed, the environment gets tapped. No, it's one time to make sure that this is an authentic digital file that then has, is numbered and so on and so forth, that then goes out. So I don't know. Like I said, I'm torn because I think, we certainly would love to pursue something that would allow us to continue to affect the culture and make young people in particular who are used to streaming everything and not paying for Netflix, getting someone's password for Netflix, watching all the content and not actually appreciating the fact that some content you got to actually pay for. You have to feel pride that you got to own it. Well, NFTs help solve that. NFTs help solve artists being able to make additional money in ways they would not traditionally make in the comics. NFT solves a lot of issues, but yes, it still has the problem affecting the environment. They're working on ethical, carbon neutral ways to affect it. But if that'll happen, if that even is real, who knows? But I just wanted to get your thought on that. I thought it was an interesting dilemma.
Yeah, that is, and I think it's just sort of those consequences, right? As an AR developer and as somebody that has an app, the consequence of having that access point is that you have to make sure people charge their battery. If their battery goes dead, then you should have had paper, right? But right, it's those sort of consequences. But it's easier for somebody to charge their battery than to walk around with a bunch of paper. And so I think for this, it's like, the opportunities for like project files and all these different things. When you have the project file, you could instead of having a 5x6 print, you could blow it up to a whole poster, and you have control over that. And so it just provides a whole lot of opportunities for a whole bunch of different things. It just puts little, it changes the landscape, and very much like the iPod video, right? Like the iPod video changed the landscape. And so now, what came after that is what we see now, and where people are doing video calls for work on their phone. It's
that's right.
And so like these types of innovations and the technology and how people are able to find use cases for it. I'm just really eager to see what people are able to come up with. And hopefully, Black people don't get screwed.
Agreed.
That's what it comes down to.
That's very true. Very true. Very true. I agree.
And so, I really appreciate it. Definitely want to try to tap in with White Manga and touch bases with him. It's been a while since I chatted with him, and where can people find all the stuff that like you're working on, you're involved in?
Yeah, well, I mean, the best way to keep track of Saturday AM is really three ways. Of course, you go to our website, which is www.saturday-am.com. We have the app called Saturday AM Global Comics. You can find that both on iOS and Android. You can also go to our website. If you go to our website, www.saturday-am.com/app for app, you'll get information there and also links to be able to properly download the apps for your respective device. And then the last thing, of course, is via social media. So most of our social media, we're listed at Saturday_AM. So if you go to Instagram or Twitter, you'll find us there. Facebook, if you type in Saturday AM, we're the first thing that pops up. And of course, you'll always see our logo or icon, which is the foot. So but yeah, it's easy to find us. We've got our stuff all over the place. So yeah, but it's been a real pleasure chatting with you, man. Thank you very much for having me on your podcast.
Oh yeah, definitely. And so yeah, we'll put all that in the chat. Hopefully everybody tap in, make sure to download the app and everything. Curious to see what everybody, which series people like. I've been following Apple Black for a hot minute. And so,
Yeah.
I didn't get the color. I didn't get the colored, republish, but
the color. You mean the graphic novel?
yeah. So I didn't get the one with the.
We actually haven't come out with that yet. From Kickstarter.
Yeah. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we actually haven't come out with that yet. So we got some announcements coming in that space. Retail's been an area that we've been pushing into, and we right when we got that Kickstarter resolved, Trump, who of course thank God he's gone, but had this dumbass thing set up with this war with China that affected tariffs, and so now all of a sudden the cost just to get the book printed and shipped to America was ridiculous. Then when that finally got resolved, when Trump had to kind of settle up with that and so forth, and he and the Chinese were acting better, then of course COVID hit. So we actually were set to do everything, and then COVID hit. So China. So you got to print the books in China, folks, if you want to actually print all the books that we're trying to print. You got to print them in China. So long story short, we're coming out with those. We got some great announcements coming soon, as I indicated. So just stay tuned for that. But you have time to buy that color version of Apple Black or color. There'll be some color elements to it. It won't be fully color, but
yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, that's good to know. But yep, again, truly appreciate it, and I just look forward to touching base with you. Hopefully during the next convention season or something. And
I hope so too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hope so too. Yeah, I love Portland, and definitely look forward to having a chance to see you in person and chat with you some more. But again, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
Okay, have a good one.
All right, take care.
And there we have it. That is another episode of the Black Superheroes Matter podcast in the wraps. Again, the purpose of this podcast is for people to get exposed to a variety of different things that Black people are creating in the arts and entertainment industry. The goal is for this podcast to bring light to all those and those creators, because as a community, we have the opportunity to skirt some of the problems that we've seen in this day and age when it comes to expressing Blackness. And so if you love this, definitely check out the more work that we're doing. Go to @BlackSuperheroesMatter, or you can go to blacksuperheroesmatter.com to check out the blog and the write-ups that we do on these guests. And if you're so inclined, feel free to support my work at Iltopia, where we have the Black Superheroes Matter art book, the Black Superheroes Matter sticker packs, and even coloring books, activity guides. And so if you want to check that stuff out, check it out at shop.iltopia.com. It's all Black owned. I might add, they're all handmade products, and they're all made with love for the community that has really given me the opportunity to find my place in this world. And so, again, thank you for another wonderful episode. Thank you for listening. Feel free to follow all the stuff that Black Superheroes Matter is cranking out. And excited to share another wonderful guest with you on next episode. So without further ado, thank you very much.